school mines on the collaborative erosion control project. Then you're going to introduce that.
I'll introduce Heidi Siegerding from School of Mines, who's been with Dr. Brett Wingwall, kind of the two primaries on steering this project. And I see she's got a couple of folks with her, so Heidi can take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you first of all for funding this project. I think it's going to be a terrific source for students in the community, really for years to come. So we're going to have students who built the project and have been up there at bare minimum weekly all summer, and we'll let them take over.
Hey, how you guys doing today? I know you guys are kind of forced to be here, so we'll try to keep it short. I'm Andrew Ferris. This is Drew Fodder. As I said, we're students over at the School of Mines, and we've been working on this research project for the last 6 months to last year. So it's been a long process, but we've definitely got some results. So you can go ahead and click for it if you don't mind. So just some general background about the location of the site. For those of you who haven't been out there, if you're familiar with the School of Mines campus, the Connolly dormitory and the Palmerton dormitory is basically right across the street up on the hill. There's basically an exposed cut there that sits about 35. The grade sits about 35 degrees, so it's really steep. And it's an exposed cut of shale, basically, where there's no vegetation. The soil conditions just are not kind of leaning towards vegetation, so we're seeing a lot of runoff, we're seeing a lot of erosion. So that's kind of the area that we decided to put the site. You want to go ahead and click? So kind of the first stage of the project was the initial testing stage. The very first stage of the project was kind of doing geotechnical analysis on the area. Part of the geotechnical analysis was just looking at kind of particle size distribution for the sediment that's already there, looking at the surface, looking 6 to 8 inches deep. And then we kind of rolled into some nutrient testing, looking at sulfates and ammonium nitrogen levels in the soil, trying to kind of draw conclusions about why we're having problems with vegetation. And from that, we found that the nutrients, just basically every nutrient that we tested was showing that vegetation was explaining why we were having problems with vegetation. So kind of rolled that into our thought process in the design phase, which we're just going to talk about next. But then after that, we kind of did some mapping. We did a GPS survey of the area where we surveyed kind of the limits. We also surveyed some cross sections to get some rough grades to see how steep of the lab itself was, and then we also rolled into some casing and did some UAV surveying to develop point clouds and develop a 3D model of the site that we kind of used for our design stage, which is going to talk about that.
Yep. So as Andrew said, Kate did initial testing before January, and our actual design testing started in about January 2020. So as you can see, the design map with the orthographic is underneath it on the top picture on the left. And then during construction is also the second flight that we flew that I actually was the pilot on. So originally we had planned for 2 rows of plots because of the area kind of just curvature. We didn't want to get too close to the bottom of the hill. When we actually went out to survey and map out the 10 by 10 squares, we ended up noticing that the incline becomes steeper more south and around the curve as we go in the valley, and we ended up changing to 3 rows. We have 25 treatment plots with 1 control plot where we did basically nothing. We were planning this design phase for multiple varieties of community members in the area, so anywhere from someone who's a farmer or rancher trying to figure out how to grow in an area like this to someone who's just trying to take care of it in any way they can. So we had 3 options: vegetated, chemical, and materialistic, or mechanical. So vegetated, we really wanted to establish the plants in the area and figure out how we can get them to grab in this soil that isn't so conducive to that environment. So we were looking for native and non-invasive species so that we can encourage that growth. Things like this, we wanted something low to the ground with many shoots and roots that could really grab on, so we chose plants like choke cherries and native seeds. For chemical, we were looking for something that still had an aesthetic, so you didn't want to pour a slab of concrete on the side of the hill and see what happened. So we ended up having some runoff issues with some of the chemical treatments, which we, in theory, didn't want, because if you had a higher plot on the collection that was a chemical treatment that had a more increased runoff, it would cause more detrimental problems for the plots beneath them and kind of skew some data. The mechanical side of things for the designs, we wanted something lightweight because hauling that much material up a hill over and over and over again, as some of you know, is not exactly the most fun thing to do. So we were looking at things like compost, rock cover, and bark covers, and you can roll things. In about mid-May to July, or beginning May to July, we started to do construction. We started with removal of trash. There were actually some homeless encampments. We had to remove futons and all kinds of garbage from not only the campus but nearby areas as well. And then we started digging trenches for the remaining plots and putting in the wood barriers, as you can see in this photo. We had a lot of people working at this stage in the project, so we were also doing lots of things simultaneously, like trails and stair construction, which can lead you up between the tiers and rows of plots. We started with most of the cover plots when we were putting treatments in, so things like compost, the bark blankets, the straw cover, and then we started with the chemical and the check dams last. The check dams ended up being the hardest thing to put in and took the longest, as one person had to individually place each board and make sure it would stay in place. The last thing that we did was put in the traction system, which you can see is the white PVC pipe. We cut it long ways. It's perforated pipe that would be covered with a non-permeable geosynthetic and staked into place. We use this with a scoop and a dustpan brush to do collection, which is the next slide actually. So after completed construction, you can see this plot has a covered straw erosion blanket over it with the collection system at the bottom. We were using a scoop that was around the same diameter as the collection pipe. The fabric is zip tied at one end and it's a little angled on the hill so that if we did have excess runoff in big storm events, all of that water would run somewhere. The sediment would be able to settle in the collection pipe and the water could run over if needed. We were looking at about 0.4 inches of precipitation events within 24 hours to cause what we needed to do for sampling. So, pretty simple process: scoop, brush, into the bag, and then into the lab for electronic scale measurement. We were also recording general observations like vegetation cover, rail and drainage problems, and the type of sediment we were seeing in the collection pipe, whether it was from the plot itself, like the compost was coming off, or if it was sediment itself. And you can go to the next slide.
So now we're going to get into kind of some of the more nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about kind of some of our preliminary results here. This is a long-term project. We're looking at a 5 to 10 year range for this project, and Ruth mentioned that we have that 0.4 inch storm event number is our primarily driver for collection. We chose that number because we're getting between about 12 and 18 of those storm events a year. So that kind of keeps the sampling duration. Approximately, those numbers are primarily going to be in the warmer months. So we're looking at 1 to 3 times a month basically is our sampling consistency. Basically, that's held true. We've done 4 samples so far since kind of opening it up for samples in June. So kind of this is an example of 3 of our plots. This kind of kind of gives us general trends. So on the very bottom there, or I guess on the y-axis, we're looking at the mass eroded. So this is the mass that we've collected per precipitation event in the collection system. So at the very bottom, you see the C-mix 1 with the jute blanket. So basically what that is the jute blanket is jute line that's weaved and it's real heavy. It takes moisture really well, which helps the seed mix because it keeps the soil moisturized for longer with the jute. And from that, we've seen some really low collection rates where we're getting between 10 to 25 grams of sediment in those collections. So we've seen a lot of success there. But kind of on the contrary, up on the top there, you see C-mix 2 with geocell and compost. So the geocells are basically a grid pattern that sit about 4 inches tall, and they're permeable in between. And we filled them on top with compost and then seeded it. And the primary driver for that is that before the seeds took and rooted in to stabilize the top of the geocell, the compost ran off. So we saw that in a variety of plots. We saw that in some of our plots that just have compost, where before that compost stabilized, and in the preliminary stages where we hadn't compacted the compost whatsoever, it was sitting at the natural compaction. We saw a lot of runoff, as expected. But so that kind of some disparity there. You want to go ahead and click continue. And then this is kind of how we've quantified the effectiveness of every plot. So every plot, basically, we quantified how easy it was to construct, how easy would this be for an entity, for a person, for a farmer, for a rancher to go out and construct. And then we looked at the cost. So we're looking at the general cost per plot, kind of comparing it against all the other plots. And then the immediate effectiveness, and then there will also be another column as more data becomes available for long-term effectiveness. And we put these on a scale of low, medium, and high. So that's kind of what we can look at. So in this example here, the seed mix one and the jute blanket, you know, it was very easy to construct. It was quite literally throw some seed out, roll the jute blanket out. So the ease of construction was low. The cost was moderate because it was an excess material, and we had very high effectiveness. And you can kind of see our 3 tiers there in terms of the effectiveness that you saw on the last slide. So, yeah, go ahead.
So as most of you know, we did have some fire damage. We had a fire on this past Sunday on the 8th. Suspected arson, no confirmed yet. But it started around plot 16 or 10, if you recall or can see in your packet, which is the choke tray plot that's covered with an erosion blanket, and also the hay plot that ignited pretty fast. So we believe that the fire kind of carried through these plots and then spread through the silt socks that were surrounding the carried fire pretty fast. They're filled with wood chips, so obviously. So the firemen actually used about 700 gallons of water within 15 minutes, and if some of you don't know, a fire hose typically exerts about 200 psi of pressure. So in this picture you can see our top trail is pretty much obliterated because not only did sediment go downslope along with the water, it also went upslope because of extreme pressure from the fire hose. So because of this we had severe trail damage and lots of water carried down. Fortunately, there was little sediment that actually left the hillside itself. We've been working on some different systems trying to keep things from eroding trails and going into nearby drainage systems, and this kind of just proved that those were effective. So you can roll to the next one. So this is kind of our map of what actually the fire impacted. Luckily, only 9 units were impacted along with that top trail. So 4 were significantly damaged, 3 were minimally damaged, and 2 were completely destroyed and will need replacing. We have about 3 pipes that need replacing along with their fabric because that was either melted or stumped on. But, and then we have about 7 silt socks that were burned overall. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll kind of open it up, field some questions from you guys if you have any, and hopefully do our best to keep it.
Any questions for, yes? Yeah?
Okay. I'm trying to understand the trend here. So the mass eroded is generally decreasing as the precipitation goes out. Is that?
We've been kind of thinking about that, and it just so happens that that basically those lower storm events occurred earlier in the sampling. And once again, when that material was pretty uncompacted, all the material was still new, and we were still seeing some impact from the construction. And we feel that kind of once we get more data, once we get a year's worth of data, those kind of outliers will even out, and it'll bring us to more of the standard trend that you would think of as storm precipitation increases, the massive eroded material also increases.
And so would that be over a 24-hour period, the storm precipitation?
It's 0.4 inches in a 24-hour period.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for the periods that we don't get that much rain for a long time, we've got a 45-day cap before the next collection needs to occur if that storm does not happen.
Yeah, and we put that 45-day in just because if you get 3 0.2-inch storms in the course of a week, you take the plot's taking 0.6 inches, but it could be affected by lesser storms. So we kind of put that 45-day number in. And on top of that, we also just have discretionary. if we feel we've had a lot of small storm events in the recent week, we can kind of go out and clear those sediment traps before we get a major storm event about 0.4 inches and above.
And had you been tracking what Director Driscoll and others have been doing at Star Village? And
I know, yeah, I know we got a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that particular figure, this figure 5 in our report, is this showing that there were 4 storm events, one of 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches, and 4 inches, or is that some sort of an artificial thing? I don't recall like a 4-inch rain in it.
Well, it's that 4-inch rain in that 24-hour period. And looking at it, actually, that might be an error, because as I think about it in my head, I don't. Yeah, that could be a graphical error, because they are on exactly one.
Then I sure don't recall 4 inches of rain.
Yeah, no, and it could be that we culminated 4 inches in a 24-hour period, but yeah, that's definitely something we can check on.
I think we need to look.
Yeah, I think that's looking at it how it's like exactly 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be just a Excel error. Any other questions?
You have a question? Hey,
So, why do you guys tell when you started on the project and what level you were in your education? What you're going into?
So I started on the project in September of 2020. I was a senior in the first semester of my senior year of college. So I've since graduated. I'm a graduate student now.
I started in January of 2020 when I was a freshman. Obviously, now we're no longer in those stations, but yeah, I started mostly in the design phase. Andrew had already done all the initial testing, and Kate had flown the initial flight. She flew actually the entire valley before we chose which location we were doing. So.
Yeah.
So with the fire damage, which is very unfortunate, very sorry to hear about
Yes.
that. Is there a lot of additional expense that you guys have seen that needs to?
Yes, so what I listed earlier was most of the damage from earlier, and we're talking with Heidi and approximating about $5,000 in overall damage that will need to be replaced.
So, what it really is because they're undergraduate student researchers, and the amount of labor that goes into manually doing all of these different activities. Because it's a combination of volunteer, but we can't do everything 100% by volunteer on campus. So it's a way of supporting the students to fix the problem. In large part, also to decide what to do about the issues. So we have 2 units to replace. I don't know if they made it abundantly clear, but they designed this and they built it. So we want to try to keep moving that forward where the students are the ones saying, hey, I want to learn this. And with input and help from the community. So most of it's going to be paying the undergraduate students to work a few hours a week to make sure everything is good. The materials, we haven't looked at everything out yet. The material cost is there, but it's mostly the labor and just the time. Because you have to do cleanup and then you have to rebuild. And they need to just live it.
The good news is lumber is not one of the issues.
Yeah. So that had to be really hard. So I can see just a lot of hard work but not insurmountable at all. But I mean, I think with this and what's going on at Star Village and that kind of progression and the studies that are being done, not just for ranchers and farmers, but hiking trails, and because nobody wants to go on a hike where it's just dead grass and it's not a lot to look at. So I see a lot of potential in both of these projects. So
Yeah, and we we're still in the process of doing a lot of things on site. The department has committed departmental funds and the school has committed funds in support of this as well. So the students have been working for, not necessarily just on the funds that West Dakota has provided. So it's definitely a joint effort, and it's requiring a lot of the team members of the community. It's some great board member help. And unfortunately, Linda, the unit you planted is
The
one
choke
that-
cherries.
Are they gone?
That was one of
That's
them.
what we
Oh.
love, is really the ignition point.
Well, and then all your choke cherry seeds that you collected.
I collected more though, so we're gonna do it again.
So I have one more question for you. So I know there's volunteer efforts at Star Village, which, and I think the other Dan, which I've not been able to participate in because my daughter's a big, crazy softball player, but, I think there's volunteer opportunities probably coming up for this, and then in addition to that, but is that something that you guys are gonna offer up to the community to
Yes.
come and help and?
Yep, we're gonna set up notices to the community. And really, I think the faculty in the civil and environmental department and the other departments on campus would really like to see more living laboratories on campus. So there's a small wetland in that rock that is being impacted by runoff from Star Village. And there's all sorts of other learning opportunities, and the goal is to make these very visible. We were putting up signs.
Yes, we were in the middle of signage production.
Yeah, so we kind of have to be careful as to how we're going to do it so it's not vandalized or stolen. And so we're facing those challenges, but there will be a large placard with an exclamation of the living lab that's been printed, which is really fortunate because of the months of we didn't quite see this out. There's a picnic table up there that we're encouraging people to, as they're walking up on the New Walker Trail, hiking trail, sit, take a look at it, and really just start talking about runoff, and sediment loss and what we can do about it. So those brochures will be available, and there'll be a place for people to come and look.
That's my understanding, the new biking trail would go right through that area
Yeah.
Right behind you.
Yeah, right underneath and behind.
and behind, so if you're out there hiking, you're gonna be able to see these signs that they're gonna put up, describing what they're doing, and,
Yeah, that's cool.
which would be good for the public.
Yeah, and if we had our way, I think eventually we'd have the trail be an integrated thing.
So my understanding, on our next meeting, this item's gonna be on, our agenda for funding request.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, thanks for.
Could I-
More questions?
I was, what actually burned, was it the plants themselves, or the straw, or the wood,
I
or?
believe the initial ignition was on the straw and hay plots, which are separated by one more plot in between them, and then from there the fire came
Okay.
between the silksocks.
And is the straw a temporary thing, just to get things growing?
No,
And
the straw is one of the plots. We were hoping that the molds caused by that plot would settle enough and cause vegetation.
Yeah, we were basically filling out, and it actually proved to be a very early on effective plot. It's just to take a portion of a hay bale and place it on there and kind of let the hay naturally decompose. And then as it naturally decomposes, basically it provides cover for the plot.
Okay,
And in that cover, you
so eventually that fire danger goes away.
yeah, eventually as the hay decomposes, that fire danger would go away. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, our fire danger had a great deal to do with how dry it's been. So we had great initial germination on the seeds that we planted. However, then we had a very hot, dry May and into June, so we ended up having quite a bit of seed loss. It looks like the cheek got split,
You didn't put any water out there, this is on that.
Yeah, we try to keep it
Yeah,
out.
for vegetation options, we chose things that didn't need irrigation because we wanted to see what would happen naturally.
Okay.
Low maintenance.
Are there these brochures being distributed?
We haven't gotten, official university approval, but I think that is.
Well, anyway, it's a great idea and a good public resource, and let everybody know what's out there.
Very nice.
And they have the brochures too,
Ron's got,
and the report.
Ron's got a question.
Just a comment, unfortunate on the fire, but it sounds like you're gonna be coming back to us the next time we have a meeting that requested funding. I guess I would just ask that you be sure to understand how you develop the rationale for your request. You know, and display that in the budget, you know, gives us good information on materials, labor, how the school's involved, et cetera.
Yes, we will definitely do. We are gonna have to take some time to assess what we can learn from this. And we learned definitely that when you spray a fire hose on the other side, sediment moves up. It still does sense, not something I thought of.
And we're starting to evaluate things this week, actually. We're preparing for drone flights on Thursday, so.
So we'll get an elevation difference between our finalized plot once we completed everything, and then how the fire and the water applied to the fire site moved the sediments and the runoff associated with that.
So
So
we'll
it's,
also have another collection of the plots that we can collect from the fire hose.
If the fire department wasn't there, it might have been the whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
they were
It is
in the
very-
area.
Yeah, I can understand.
Now you've got another question, now you've got me interested in the drone deal. Are the students doing that?
Yeah, actually, yeah, the drone pilot.
She's a licensed pilot.
Do you get elevation differences down to what precision?
Precision wise, we get a topographic map, so it's a point cloud, and it'll be, it auto generates point differences, so the points will be around plus or minus 5 centimeters apart maximum, as far as accuracy.
We think we'll be able to finish it up pretty well because we have all the other plots.
Yes. And we also have, we'll probably pull out some RTK GPS surveying, so we have drone targets that can accurately, if I learn how to do it, lay it over a map. So,
You
yeah.
might have to have your help over at Star Village to track what we get done over there.
Yeah,
I think that's
a
something
good
we
idea.
definitely can do. We have some new equipment, that we were able to purchase through our endowment that is higher precision.
Higher precision is squinting and going, that's higher than it was before. Very good.
Thank you for coming. It's important to see us.
Thank you.
We'll see you next.
I'd like to see them all.
Yes.
Very good. So we're on item number 10, new funding for the Tout Advertising to redesign their webpage. Cheryl, your name's on that. Anything?
Yep, Dan and I were on a call with,
Tracy.
yeah, with Tracy. And, I think that everything that she said really was, she had some really great ideas. Really, it needs updated, the website. And, for not just the visual aspect of it, but data that's on there, to clean it up a little bit and make it more user-friendly. And, she had some great ideas, and, I think that she does our website, so she's so familiar with everything. And I think we should approve, having her, redesign the website, and we could put a cap on the price of like maybe $1,000. That would be my proposal.
So, just to understand it, because I was trying to figure out exactly what the total cost of what
She gave us a quote of about 800.
820?
Yeah,
Okay, so you're suggesting that we
I would just say bump it up a little bit
do $1,000?
and just put a cap on it of 1,000. I think that would be good.
Is that your motion then? Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Dennis. Okay, it's open for discussion. Any discussion on the motion?
I'll just mention, we had looked at East Dakota website as kind of an idea of, not that we're gonna, one of our goals is to be better than them, so. Sorry, Jay. Yeah. So we'll have a little friendly competition.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, seeing no other discussion, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to 10A. The Midco statement.
Okay.
Everybody have this in front of them? The Midco statement?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's 10A.
we
Yeah,
have it-
okay,
have it
yeah,
in there,
I didn't
10A.
put it in there, thanks.
Yes. That's called 10A, so. Dan, you wanna? go
Sure. This hit me before or after our executive board meeting, that's why it's added. However, they do, okay, right now we have a contract with, I didn't even really know we had a contract per se, but it's about $38 a month. And so for some reason, the contract is 36 months, but they require us to basically re-sign up again. So this will just be, this is nothing new, it's just a continuation of something that we have routinely in the budget all the time. But I would just like authorization to go ahead and put our name on this, since it is a contract, put our name on here to extend the, or renew the contract for another 36 months. No changes in the cost of anything.
That's what I was gonna ask, is have we been paying 38, 67
Yeah.
a month for some time?
Right, yeah.
So it's more an extension, a time extension than a cost.
Correct, yeah.
Any, is there a motion to extend the contract? Motion by Dan.
Well,
Well,
I don't know that we even need a motion for something like that. I consider this business as usual if we
Oh,
feel compelled, but I think we operate without
is
internet.
that something we have to sign?
I have to put my name on, sign this electronically,
I would say we need a motion.
so I'd just like to play it safe, but I'm willing to go with the consensus of everybody if they think it's just a routine.
Consensus of the board on this issue. Tom?
I would like to move to approve of extending the contract and giving Dan the authorization to sign this back.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Second by Cheryl. Now, discussion on the motion.
I just have a question for Dan. Where do we get our internet? Is that in the garage or usually it's
Yeah.
through one of these Midco things or?
The internet is supplied by the garage as part of our rent.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 11, approve the funding for admin and other West Dakota directors for possible road trip to Chamberlain for meeting with the West Dakota Development Managers and Kurt Pfeiffer with the Rural Water Systems. What's your name on that?
Yeah, because I just said, yep, we could
What's
add
your name,
this.
Ryan?
Yep.
She said, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All I know right now is it's a meeting that's being proposed to talk about expanding water resources and I'm sure that,
If
you would
Chairman,
have
it's all
more
right.
to add.
Yeah,
Yes, go
again,
ahead.
Jay Gilbertson, East Dakota. I guess we started here three, 4 years back. Anyway, the managers of the rural water, or the water development district, there are even fewer of us. There are only 7 across the state, and we've all kind of do things differently, but we all work off the same basis. So we've been trying to get together, I don't know, every year and a half or something like, just touch base, see who's doing what, anybody has any questions. Obviously, you know, like Dan, a number of the managers are part-time, whereas one full-time, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, we haven't, I'm trying to think, we last met late in 2019, a couple of months before COVID hit. So it wouldn't be a bad idea for another meeting, and then at the rural water managers meeting last month, there was a fairly extensive discussion of kind of long-range planning. It sounded a whole lot like the big giant pipe that you guys are exploring on behalf of, you know, a lot of different entities here in the western South Dakota. You know, similar conversations going on. The Lewis and Clark pipeline, which you've all heard of, is still not fully built out yet, but it's already time to start looking at the second pipe, because that water isn't going to be enough to meet the needs of a growing region, even when it is fully there. And there are other parts of the state. Aberdeen does not get service from the web pipeline. The big giant pipe comes in from Missouri, and so forth. So anyway, that topic and sort of the other general stuff is what we're planning. I propose sometime in October. Pretty much everybody appears to be there. We're going to work around Dan's teaching schedule, because he's got the biggest conflict on that. But that's what we would do. It would be held most likely at the Cedar Shore Resort. That's centrally located, obviously, Foxton is doable for the rest of us as well.
Do directors generally go to that too, or not?
I don't know that we've had any, but I don't see any reason why not.
Okay.
We could throw you out if we wanted to talk smack about yours.
I was just curious.
But, no, yes, I think anybody is welcome to that.
Okay. Any questions for Jay on this item? So, is there a motion on the floor for this?
Well, I guess I can just comment that we can, with board approval, we can fund travel up to $250.
Yeah.
The chair or vice chair can do that.
Okay.
But now, if you're gonna stay overnight and then have mileage, it may go over that.
Yeah, my thought was that if it was just me, or if it wasn't just me, but we just leave early in the morning and then do the meeting and then get back that same day. Does that sound feasible?
That's what most, I don't think anybody's historically. We've done it a couple of times in Chamberlain and once in Pierre.
So if I did my math right, per person or say we rode in the same car, that would be $176, which could be approved by the executive board or.
And we've got 400 in the budget, is what you're saying here.
Yeah, and then there's the little per diem if you,
See that.
doesn't pay much, but.
It looks like we don't need to take formal action on it then. Or am I right?
Probably not, unless for some reason we wanted to take 2 vehicles. If there were more than, if anybody else is interested, I don't know. I just figured there might be a director that would want to go too, because it does concern stuff kind of outside the administration stuff of water development districts that we usually cover. We usually talk about things like that and legislation and things generally the directors may not be interested in, but in this case, it may be different.
Are there any directors that might be interested in attending this meeting? Nobody's raising their hand.
What day is it?
It's not set yet.
Oh, it's not sent yet. I got it, okay.
It would
Possibly October.
probably a Tuesday.
Okay.
Probably a
Okay, I got
Tuesday.
it. All right.
Okay. Well, I guess if we can, our chair or vice chair can keep up to
yeah.
we don't need that action.
Probably not, so.
And technically, worst case scenario, depending on which Tuesday is picked, because that's your day that you're most free, isn't it, if you're scheduled. If it's past the second Tuesday, we can always revisit it during the October meeting as well, so.
Okay, well, I guess it's more of an FYI thing.
And maybe in the meantime, you could find out if other districts are thinking of sending directors. You know, because at first I thought, yeah, we would send somebody, but if nobody else is,
I will check that out.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Item 12, is approve the West Dakota Water Development District 2022 budget and levy amount. Ron?
Okay, so this is kind of the third part of our annual process. It's pretty well outlined on page 15 of the packet under agenda item 12, what's taken place so far. Last month we voted to accept the default tax levy funding for 2021 and to propose a budget for 2022. Both of those have now been publicly advertised in our newspapers of record. And so this month we would act on finalizing the tax levy funding, accept it as the default amount, and to accept the proposed budget we had, or the draft budget that's been published. And so the details of the budget are, in the following pages, 16, 17, and 18. I don't think there are any changes from, there's no changes because it's published as public record. So in light of that, I guess at this point I would, prior to get through the discussion going, I would make a motion to approve the tax levy funding, the default tax levy funding for 2022, and our draft budget as published in our newspapers of record in August, or July and August.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Tom? Okay, now it's open for discussion. No discussion, not seeing none, I will go ahead and all in favor of the motion, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Oh, that's the first time that's happened. The budget meeting.
I think it is a record. Okay, that was item number 12, and item 12A. We added to the agenda because Jay's here to talk about rotating basin assessment project. You have the floor, Jay.
All right. Dan, I sent you an email a few minutes ago. I don't know if
Yeah.
you did that.
I saw that.
You want to fill up the attachment, if that's possible?
Um,
Everybody get a copy of
Yeah,
this?
you should have a copy of your, it's got a little colorful map on the front page.
For some reason, it's not, I don't know my password.
All right,
And this one.
it's just, I'm just gonna have you, it's the same image that's on the handout, everybody's got it.
Okay, all right.
No.
I'll stand over here so I can, boom. Well, Galen got his big boy voice this time. And I think something that I've probably mentioned in the past to the board, some of you have heard this, I don't know if DNR has been here to talk about it, but about 4 years ago, my staff and the DENR Watershed Protection Program were looking at how water quality data is collected across the state. Every 2 years, the state is required under the Clean Water Act to generate document. Trying to think what the numbers are. It's section 303D and 305B out of the Clean Water Act. It's basically a description of the condition of the waters of the state, surface water, streams and lakes. We have to make that report every 2 years. The 305B part is all of them. The 303D subset are those that aren't meeting the standards that we have applied to them, or that the state government and federal government has applied to those. For example, as been mentioned earlier, Rapid Creek is used as a drinking water supply. One of the criteria, the nitrates have to be below 10. If they're over 10, then it fails. It would be considered impaired for that purpose. And if it's impaired, it shows up on the 303D list. There are 150-ish, I'm looking at Director Harris, state monitoring sites, WQM sites across the state.
Yeah, unless they've made substantial changes.
Yeah, there's about 150 places all across South Dakota where DENR on a regular basis collects water quality information. Some of it is quarterly, some of it is monthly. Seasonally, in certain instances for some areas. That provides a good baseline information, but it doesn't necessarily always provide us with a really robust data set. And so often is not, when we put something up, just pull the map up again, that's the map just for reference. Often is not, if a determination is made about whether or not a water body, a portion of the Big Sioux River, for example, is meeting its designated use, that determination is not based on a huge amount of information. It may be we just had a few really good samples, and so it looks good, but it's kind of crappy the rest of the time. Or we only have a few samples, they just happen to be bad, and so it's listed as bad, when most of the time it would be considered good. This is important because it drives a lot of the funding the federal government provides South Dakota, and other states as well, obviously, for doing watershed protection and restoration activities. Right now, the Big Sioux River Basin alone is probably that support and non-support status is driving about a $5 million a year investment in water quality improvements. The legislature this year passed House Bill 1256, putting $3 million more into the Big Sioux Basin to address water quality issues and concerns. With that level of funding, it's really nice to know that we're working in the right places on the streams and rivers and lakes that are really in trouble. The data set that the state sort of normal collection works with, as I said, doesn't always give us the best results. Intensive studies are done from time to time, but those tend to be a one-off sort of thing. And once that investigation's over, we don't come back necessarily. And so, again, a few years back, we started exploring what is called the rotating basins assessment approach. And what it is, on the map on the screen, the one in front of you, we've divided the state up into 5 chunks. Big Sioux in Minnesota on the far east, sort of the upper James and the lower James Central coming over, the Great Plains, and then the Black Hills. And the idea is that we would conduct accelerated extensive testing above and beyond what the state's already doing on a regular basis for a 2-year period, get a good, robust data set so that when the next report came out, we really had some good information. 2 years are up, we move to the next site, do the same thing, then to the next, then to the next, then to the next, and then come back and start the process over again. And the map in front of you shows rotation 1, that's the Big Sioux Basin. We're currently wrapping up that work right now. 2019 was kind of a trial run, held a beta test, and then in 2020 and now 2021, we are currently conducting this intensive monitoring twice a week at 42 different sites on rivers and streams, monthly on another 35 lakes across the region. Data we're generating is way above and beyond anything we've had access to before. and we're gonna get some really good numbers. 2021 is about to come to an end. 2022 is the next rotation. Who goes next? The plan had been to go into the lower James, that orange area of the map, working with some existing programs. That isn't necessarily going to work. Well, one of the things we've learned in the last few years is this takes a lot of effort. It's what Linda did for a living for a long time. And it takes some expertise, it takes a lot of equipment, there's a lot of things that go into it. And right now, that particular area, there's nobody that can do this. This is not something, if the state's helping to pay for it, they'll pay for a bit of it. But they're not doing it, they're doing their own stuff. This is an outside thing. We don't have that outside infrastructure in the lower James right now. And literally 20 hours ago, 30, I was visiting with the head of the Watershed Protection Program, and we were discussing the fact that my chief water quality sampler is tired of living in the Big River Basin and wants to move out here, and wants to live in the Black Hills. And we're like, ooh, this could provide an opportunity. Kevin knows how to do this stuff. Watch this thing. And so in the last 24 hours, we have put together a proposal or a concept that would involve moving the Black Hills region, the light green, into the number 2 position on the rotation. 2022, we would start sampling in the Black Hills for the rotating basins assessment. Now I say we, hopefully somebody goes, well, wait a minute, we's over on the other side of the state, as far as Jay's concerned. That's true, but we have the people, we have the gear, we have the expertise, and so what we're going to be proposing, and again, this is a very much of an evolving conversation, what we propose to the state, we're kicking around the idea, is we would do the work using my employee who wants to move to the Black Hills as the core, and the gear that we've assembled and the experience and the expertise. Hopefully in conjunction with the local cooperator. That's would be the hope. And over time, work up the experience to get, build up the local capacity for doing this kind of assessment work in the Black Hills area. Because it takes a certain amount of it. It's not something you can flip a switch and make this stuff happen. But we've got the gear, we've got people, we've got the whole thing set up. And so we're starting to explore this as an opportunity to come out and do that. Now obviously West Dakota is only a thin part of the middle, but for some of you, I'll talk to Mr. Driscoll and Chairman Dan, Director Dans, who were around earlier, the Black Hills Hydrology Study, which is a major regional assessment of the hydrology of the greater Black Hills region. The local spearhead was West Dakota Water Development District in its current configuration, just Pennington County west of the Cheyenne, but with a focal point for work that was done on the whole basin. And so we're exploring, or looking into just how we could make it work to do the Black Hills rotating basin assessment next year. Any questions? I hope there are some. I'm going to go with the chair.
Okay. I met with Jay here before the meeting. He used to be on this ahead of time. One of the things that we were talking about was the funding part of it and possibly getting grants.
Right. Yeah. Funding for the current activities. Funding is being provided by East Dakota and by DANR, those guys, the department. We are actually contributing a pretty significant amount of money to this activity. Partly because we think it's a good idea, but also because we were doing a lot of it anyway. we were doing a lot of our own monitoring. And when this came up and they're sort of copying what we were doing, it was like, oh, great, we don't have to pay for the analysis? Because I was paying for the people and the analyses, and the state said, well, we'll pay for the analyses. Okay, fine. So we're involved. Obviously, East Dakota isn't going to write the check for work done in the Black Hills. Hopefully that's obvious to everybody here. I understand that, but so does DENR. And so, while in our case the grant is really only covering all the analytical costs and we're doing all the legwork and the rest of that sort of stuff, phase 2, the grants are going to eat most of it, if not all. And they know that and they understand it, and that isn't a problem. Now, obviously, having some local cost share would be helpful, you know, and appropriate, depending on the source. But the bigger part is, you know, there isn't the infrastructure to do this kind of work out here now. And well, I'm glad you stayed. That's fine. You know, there could be, it could build up over time, but to get this going next spring, you had to ask me, when does it have to start? We were collecting samples in the end of April of this year. We'd need to start collecting samples in the end of April of next year to get phase 2 rolling. That isn't going to happen over here. Not at the level that we need. We can't take these 2 good undergraduate students, get them up to speed with to where Director Harris was a couple of years ago. It will come eventually, but it's not going to happen overnight. We can transition that with our resources. And so I'm here today just to sort of say this out loud to you folks and see if anybody immediately starts throwing rocks. I don't care if you throw rocks. And then, because there are about 1 million different things we have to figure out as to how this would work. But it's clear that that orange isn't gonna. And because my guy wants to come out and live in the hills, it's like, oh wow, if we've got Kevin, what can we put around Kevin to get this up and running while we help bring other groups on board, develop some of the expertise and support. I'm sorry.
Well, what is the cost share that you're thinking? Just ballpark, like it doesn't have to be like this is the number and this is what the number's going to be, but just like give me a range of like what we might be looking at.
If we did
because I know this is a completely different region, completely different
right.
setup. So I get that, but I was just curious of what the number that we might have to look at. Granted, it can be varying levels. We don't have to.
Yeah, I would say if the current agreement that we've got with DNR is $325,000. They're in for about 220. We're in for about 105. That lowballs our contribution. A lot of the things that some of the day-to-day upgrade stuff, calibration solutions, which we didn't really think about at the time. We're eating all those costs. We're not getting rid of. Now, the state's identified 70 different stream segments in the Black Hills region they would like information on. 70 monitoring sites is insane. Kevin's good. My guys are good, but they're not that good. Director Harris.
There were 50.
Huh?
There were 50 sites.
I was going to say, you were doing 50. I did a quick count right now. DNR currently has, I think, 53 that are on the big WQM list. They have 54 that say, well, one of them is like the White River at Ogallala, so I'm ignoring that one. There are currently 53 WQM sites in the Black Hills region. Those are many of the targets we're doing on the eastern side. We're just hitting them twice a month or 3 times a month, depending. That is close. That's a little more than what we're doing. We're doing 42. but we're doing 35 lakes, and there are, I think, 20 or 23 that are in this list that may get pared down. We're probably talking for a sliver of the middle, 25, 30, 35,000 somewhere in there a year for a couple of years. But that's just
No, that's fine. I just
Out of the
wanna
year.
make sure that it
Yeah.
wasn't like 1.5 million and then.
Oh, no.
So-
No, but again, part of it is, and I tell Dan, just leaving this morning, I was met with Kevin, going out to do stuff. And I'm sitting here looking around and going, oh, crud, where are we gonna put the stuff? You know, we need a building. DNR's getting a new one, I don't know if there's room.
Probably not. Sounds like
Probably
a
not.
cube city.
And
Yeah.
it's sort of like all of the infrastructure that we have sitting in Brookings that is allowing this to happen doesn't necessarily, we're gonna have to find it out here. I don't think it's impossible, we've got some ideas already on it, but it's still, this is a work in progress. Like I said, at 11 o'clock, or 9 o'clock yesterday morning, I was having a philosophical conversation with the head of the Watershed Protection Program. At 11:30, he called me back, and all hell broke loose in my head. And so,
Ron's got,
it sounds to me like, it's a real, similar kind of an exercise that got involved with the Black Hills Hydrology, and that we're, to some degree, actually involved with now with this, need assessment for water in the immediate area, so it kind of matches with things that we have done and we are doing, so from my perspective, I think it's a perfect thing to be considering. The other thing is that how, or could, or maybe would the Black Hills Council of Local Governments possibly be involved, since they represent lots of these little communities where water supplies or water bodies or stream segments flow through?
I think we would look out to, again, you go back to the Black Hills Hydrology Study because of the management arrangements at the time. We had an in with the Black Hills Council because it was damaged. It was also, I think we would certainly reach out to other potential sources for assistance on this. Again, right now, I'm not ready to even think about what would be involved, because I don't know. There's these, again, 71 different segments that they, well, here's what it was, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Right now, it takes Kevin takes him a week to do one run on the rivers and streams, 4 full days. We do that twice a month. The 30-odd lakes take another 5 weeks of staff time. That's 7 weeks. I don't think we've got 7 weeks in a month. I'm a geologist, but we don't have that. So, I mean, there are staffing issues, there are other things that need to get resolved, but we're thinking.
one of the things in our discussion was that, I was figuring out, how do we do this logistically, since we don't have the staff, obviously, we're not staffed up like East Dakota. And, what we were talking about is that we would contract with, we would be the recipient of any grant money, and then we would take a contract with East Dakota to do the work. And so, we would write the checks for whatever things, and your experienced folks would.
We're doing something similar with a couple of watershed projects back home. We provide the staff, but we have a local sponsor. I think from a, what have you done from a lately kind of perspective, to have, even in this case, West Dakota could conceivably have the contract with DA&R to do the work. And then immediately turn around and we do an agreement between East Dakota and West Dakota for us to provide whatever's necessary to get the work done. And over time, if that, opportunities arose and other things came up, then we could shift some of that as well. Then you're doing something there. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct or not?
So, I don't know if I'm gonna say this right, but this looks like a much bigger area than just the Clinton County area.
Oh, yeah.
So, that brings up one of the concerns or the thoughts that I had, and I agree with Director Code, that this seems like it would fall right in line and be very parallel to a banner project, where we're trying to bring water out to western South Dakota, and there has been objection on this board to the banner project because we're spending Pennington County money on something that could possibly benefit a much larger area that is portrayed on this map. So I guess my only comment is, if we're interested in doing something like this and helping fund something like this, which I would be all for, then I would just comment that I think that our minds should be also fully open to other projects that don't just support the Pennington County area. Because, I mean, I hope everybody understands what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be snarky or anything like that, but you support a large area like this and you're willing to give money to something like this, then you should be willing to give money to other projects that benefit outside of this area, to include the banner project.
And then just follow up on that, the next map in the bundle, the next page, there's a little more detailed map. There's a red line that kind of wanders around that covers, is the green area, the little light green area in the map. Obviously, your part of Pennington County is just a slice in the middle. Question about match. If, I understand, the state understands that, work that's done in Lawrence and Meade, and Custer and Fall River is outside your area, and there's absolutely no reason to expect West Dakota to provide support that would help Custer with Pennington County tax money. And so, part of the match, if you will, would be figuring out, okay, well, here's how many, for the monitoring, here's how much of the project is really sitting in Pennington County, and then that sort of portion might be something we would talk to you folks about and say, all right, well, this is, would you make a contribution, or would you contribute some amount of money at that local level, and then either the state understands that if they want this done, particularly want it started in April, they're going to come up with all the rest of it. I mean, that has been part of that conversation. At the same time, it would be an opportunity as well for us then to say, maybe to go up to Lawrence County and say, look, this is what's going to be going on. These are the reasons we think it's beneficial. Might you be interested in making a contribution, which, again, under this scenario we talked about, might be, they might give money to you guys, because you're the project sponsor, but then that offsets funding and resources.
And the other thing that, we could go to the county commissioners from the other counties, or if they have a conservancy district, Pennington County, they have a conservancy district that has monies available too for projects. There's probably other sponsors that we could partner with on, a project that's gonna benefit the entire population here in the Blackfoot area.
I mean, the more we know about Spearfish Creek, okay, which is entirely outside your area, I think, if we don't have a really good picture of its condition right now, good or bad, having a better data set gives us a better picture, could free money up through the 319 program and other state programs that could be then invested in Lawrence County. Without something like this, that is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Okay, it would be very easy for someone to argue, well, you don't really know that it's good, or you don't really know it's that bad. It's just for anyway, so yeah, it would provide an opportunity to reach out to folks. I certainly understand, the state guys certainly understand that your base is a piece of that puzzle. In that same sense, my district ends, East Dakota, you can make it out, right here, Lower Big Sioux, this is Lincoln and Union County down here. That's not part of East Dakota. Like the Conservancy used to be back in the day, but isn't anymore. And then far up here, this is Roberts County and some of this stuff. This is also outside of my district. Now, our guys go down here and sample, but we're getting compensated for that from a project that wants that information that's based down there. We're providing a little bit because it's just easier and cheaper. And the same thing up here. When we leave the state, we leave the district, things change a little bit. So we're not using our tax base, our tax funds, to pay for things that are benefiting people outside of our area. If I think we get a benefit from it, and the board agrees with me, then we'll do it. But for the most part, and we have done, we've done lake sampling on the western side of the Jim River Basin under contracts.
I don't know these people that were in that program now in the first place. I mean, I used to do a lot of work with those people, these are not people that I consider. This particular area, I don't know, and I was telling Jay that maybe it would be good if the board is interested in looking into this concept. We could go down to Peter. They said he'd be glad to join us and meet with the people that are handling these grants and see what they think. And we should hold the same thing. Well, we're only maybe 25% of the area that we're talking about in this rotation two. The Big Black Hills area, because it goes way down to the Fall River and into Butte County. And financial. I totally agree. I mean, we should be spending West Dakota money outside of our district because it's the taxpayers that are funding us.
Well, and I think this is very worthwhile. I mean, just even what little I've heard, I'm saying that if we entertain helping fund this, that we need to be open when someone else presents a project that's outside of Pennington County. We should be open to, this could set a precedent, that if we're supporting something like this, that we should also be willing to support other projects that assist Western South Dakota.
Sure, and I always worked for the city on the Black Hills, I was on the steering committee, of course, ESG was involved. And West Dakota is basically the same boundary. They were making the lead sponsor on the hydrology study, so
Sure.
the funding, but there was a lot of other funding that came into Bureau of Reclamation. I don't know if the USGS put money into that, but there were several.
They were mostly takers.
But it was federal dollars that were used to fund that program. They needed a local sponsor, and West Dakota stepped up to the plate back then. And you probably have copies of the documents that was a valuable piece of information right there.
Yeah, that's important.
And so that's how that occurred.
Yeah, great.
And we were just a small sliver of that.
My arm's gonna wear out.
Yours gonna run.
No, drop it there.
So the funding model for the funding scenario for the Black Hills hydrology study, it was DENR then put up a cash match with the local entities. They matched each other dollar for dollar. And USGS matched those dollars, dollar for dollar. So in essence, the local share was 25%, the state share was 25%, and then 50% came out of, USGS matching funds. Above and beyond that, the South Dakota Geological arm of DENR drilled a lot of wells around the country that, there was a lot of cost there, highly valuable. So West Dakota was the kind of the lead entity. The funding agreements were always written between USGS and West Dakota, and the state, basically there was a separate agreement with the state for the state dollars. So basically West Dakota was the broker, if you will, for Lawrence County, Meade County, Custer, and Butte County. I don't think if they contributed, it would have been very seldom. Fall River County, I don't recall well enough there either, but certainly Lawrence County was another stalwart with West Dakota, and their big concern had been, the mining industry was growing at that point in time, and they wanted to know, water quality was a big deal to them, jobs versus economic development versus environmental effects. So I think it comes very easily, contribution from West Dakota. I mean, it's certainly in our wheelhouse to try to come up with funding from these county commissions, other county commissions, if that's what's required. I wouldn't give you a snowball's chance of hell of getting started by April. Might you be able to get something going? If DENR or DANR, is willing to underwrite it. There's been the Belle Fourche Water Setting project has been, I don't know what they're doing financially these days, but there's a potential partner up there. But I think one of the mainstays, I'm not sure if I'm hearing you exactly right, Wendy, but my standpoint would be, thou shalt not spend West Dakota dollars outside of Pennington County. I mean, it's fine to move a little across the border here and there for whatever circumstances, but if we were to say, well, we'll underwrite the entire local cost share, it would not fly with the taxpayers. It would not fly. So I guess, I think it comes easy for Pennington County, and beyond that, you may have to find a rabbit in a hat to how can you. I realize you're wanting to just deal with your Kevin, whoever Kevin is. Apparently is the main driver.
Well, he is one of several things, and I would just say, because I know you want to get out of here at 5.
It doesn't matter.
And Dr. Susan has a question, but we understand how the funding would work, and this shift is something that we've taken. DNR has taken on with us. We want to make this. This is the only way we're going to get another section up to speed next year. And so, going into this is a fully funded by the state idea as a local partner with, potential, something out of West Dakota might be helpful, but if we've got to go it alone, because, you're right. We have to get this started next spring, regardless. Now, over time, if we can bring others on board, then great. And that may take starting to demonstrate what we're doing so people go, oh yeah, we can support that. And then we'll get some help, and then maybe, we only have to survive on 90% DNR or something. But that's sort of get there. We're not anticipating coming to you guys and saying we want all of the local match from West Dakota that will provide the support for the whole basin. No, we're gonna, here's what we think is a reasonable number based on the amount of work that's gonna happen in Pennington County. That's part of this. The rest of it, we will find somewhere else. Okay.
We would definitely need some assistance since, this is all new to us.
Right, well, and that's it. This is part, excuse me.
How many people realistically do you need to monitor these sites?
Our current, the number of sites that will be in this is yet to be determined. Okay, we are currently working, as I mentioned, 42 river sites and 35 lakes. That's a bunch. We've got, garage space that's about half the size. We've got boats, we've got meters, we've got sampling gear, we've got a bunch of stuff. It's not an insurmountable problem, but it's bodies, it's the space. On the body side, I've basically got 2 full-time staff. The aforementioned Mr. Christensen, and another one of my staff members, Jeremy Hinkie. He's kind of leading the lake side of the data collection. And we've got a couple of summer techs that are helping us out. I don't like sending somebody out on Lake Thompson in a john boat by themselves to try and take a sample. That seems like a good idea. Yeah. And so we're looking at, again, it kind of depends on where we settle in, but, certainly going to have 1 full-time sampler and a helper, and maybe another part-time sampler and a helper, and some amount of space that, again, that's part of Kevin's homework while I'm out here, is to figure that out. We don't think about it because we just have it, we just do it, but,
So that you've got 71 rivers and streams, and then you have 23 lakes.
23 lakes,
okay.
right. Currently, if you look at the back, I think it's there's a table on the back of that front sheet that lists the 5 areas. The AUs, what does that stand for? Do you remember? It's a segment or a chunk. There are 43 AUs in the Big Sioux, Upper Minnesota in red. We're monitoring 42 sites.
Okay,
They
so-
got just about all of them.
So does somebody have to sit down and decide where the sample exactly?
70, there are 71 of those river units in this area. That ain't happening. I'm here to tell you. We can't do that. That's nuts. Some of those are going to be tiny little streams off in the middle of nowhere that the guy who lives there cares deeply about, but nobody else does, and would cost half a day of sampling. So that list needs to get pared down. The lake list will also get pared down. There were 57 lakes in our area. We pared that down to about 30, 35.
And who does the parent?
DNR staff and my people.
Okay.
The 2019, I mentioned earlier, we did kind of a beta run, a trial run in 2019 to see, here's what we think we can do, and could we do it? And some of the things we discovered is we can't do this. And the more people we put into it simply meant whenever you moved out of the Big Sioux Basin, you were super screwed. I mean, at what we're at now, we don't have that capacity anywhere else to build it. If we'd have done even more work in our part of the world, then to take that same model and come out and do that Middle Plains area, there's nobody there. There's no way we could support that level of study. And the idea, the core idea around all of this is to have this intense sampling 2 years every 10, just completely recycling, getting that good data set going. So we're gonna have to scale that back.
So would West Dakota have any input into what gets sampled?
I would certainly think so. I'll be real honest.
Rapidly.
Right here. And again,
Because we've talked about
I
sampling.
mean, all of you in general, but Linda's job, forgive me again, but Linda's job was doing exactly this. And so, if nothing else, the first thing anyone else is going to do is probably call her anyway and say, hey, how did you do ding, 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 ding? Or what were the troubles at WQM 952 on Coolidge Creek? You know, what were the issues? And she'll go, oh, well, you got to watch out for da-da-da-da-da. That takes some knowledge. Certainly, we would want to get you guys involved.
You might want to add the column for county on the, I notice on the lakes you have county, and it's hard to look at this and know.
24 hours. I'm just
Okay.
saying.
Well, I think this is exciting. And something certainly, this type of thing is certainly part of our mission statement and what we're here for. To make sure that, our waters, whether they're stream waters or lake waters, are monitored, water quality.
Well, and I guess I will chime in now. I do also think that this is exciting, and it's great to move from being the fifth basin to number 2.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to the USGS presentation, I think all the waterfowl has to have an impact on that lake. I just don't think that they've maybe captured it, or I'd love to be proved wrong. This intense sampling would tell us that. And it would also give us a much better picture of all of Rapid Creek and what's happening as it goes through our district. And it sounds like we can work out the details for what happens in the other areas as well. But yeah, I think this is something certainly worth looking at, and I'd be happy to help where I can.
Well, that's, if there are more questions, again, this was, again, Dan and I met before the meeting, that would be okay to give the spiel. Again, we're miles away from getting anything formal, but I would hope then to be maybe back by the October meeting with a much more coherent plucked from the work plan, and go from there.
Is there a general consensus of the board here to move forward on this and find out, get more information from Jay, and like I say, maybe even talk to the folks down here that run this program? It'd be nice to, I don't know the names, so it'd be nice to know it, since they'll probably be able to provide us some good information too, as we move forward on this thing. So, what do you think?
All right, well, thank you, and I
Thank you.
apologize for keeping it a little bit late.
Well, we were trying to get done in 2 hours.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, we're close. All right. Chair comments, I don't have any. Is there any items from the director?
Oh, we didn't do 13.
What is 13? Chair's comment, that's me.
Oh, we're not talking about your,
You might have an old agenda.
oh, I've got, that's the old one.
You got the old one.
That was completely
Yeah, we
taken
just,
off. Okay,
we wrapped up, 12 days.
never mind.
13, no comments from the chair, any items from the directors? Penny?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple things. I have one question for Jay, if that's okay. You mentioned something about, the Lewis and, they're already looking at adding a new pipeline. Is it for population reasons, or because they realized that the first one wasn't big enough? I'm just curious.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
the first one was big enough. I mean, the first one did what it was supposed to do. And I maybe mentioned this before, or Carol would have talked this out. 35, 40 years ago, the city and a bunch of us, the state survey, looking ahead, and the consensus was that at sort of its current growth or expected growth rate, Sioux Falls was going to be using all of its available water. I don't want to say run out, never going to run out, but all of the water that they could lay their hands on would have been used. Mm-hmm. And so the next person who moved to town would have to bring their own water.
Oh.
Okay? And so it was time to start looking ahead. Now, that included consideration of the Southeast Pipeline, which is now Lewis and Clark, a big pipe from somewhere else. But it also involved looking at a whole bunch of other options locally, different aquifers that were in the area, different places, evaluating, was there water there? If so, how much, and what was its quality, and would it really meet the needs? And at the end of all that, it was all of those other aquifer options were sort of like, yeah, no, they're theoretically they would work, but practically no. So Lewis and Clark was there. The expectation was that that 54-inch pipe would provide the capacity for the city to continue to grow for another 20, 25 years. Okay? Growth is continuing at a pace that's maybe a little more than expected. And if a new company comes to town that uses a lot of water, there's a new pork processing plant that's been proposed for the northeast side of Sioux Falls, 2.5 million gallons a day. That is that's like 5 years worth of buffer that the pipe was supposed to provide. And so instead of going, all right, it's 2012, we got the Lewis and Clark, we're good for 25 years, now maybe it's only 20. And so the original pipeline is doing everything it was supposed to do. But growth in the area the area continues to grow. Rapid City, same thing. And so, yeah, it was never expected that it would be the end-all water source forever and ever. It's only so big. And we're looking at, 20 years, 15, 20 years down the line, we're gonna be back at that 2012 situation where the next guy in has to bring his own water. We don't run out, but if you wanna come over, you have to bring your own water.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you. The second thing I have is for the board, and I still really believe in this. I would say, oh, I haven't put this together because I don't think there's an urgency. That's not the case. I just have not done it, so I have to fall on my sword and say, what I had proposed a few months ago was to pull together some basic principles behind making sure that there's equitable treatment when we're giving funds or grants or entering into a type of contract with someone. So I do believe also that there is a need coming up once, and apparently it's $250,000 when this group could be audited, or a auditing group comes in and asks to see the books and to study what kind of controls that we have behind giving funds out. To include, if you are paying someone, do you ask them to account for their time, depending on whether it's a grant or whether they're on a type of payroll or entering again into a type of contract like we have with Banner. So I am going to follow my sword and say I just haven't had a chance to get it done. I still really do believe in that, and I think it would benefit this group greatly. Not just so you can say, hey, if someone comes along, you are giving them funds and they didn't fulfill their end of the bargain. You have documentation to show what is necessary to fulfill their obligation. It also could benefit or would benefit if an auditing group comes in and asks to see your controls, you have those well documented. So my intent is to still put together some basic items, and that's in my wheelhouse. Nothing crazy. I mean, I don't want anybody to think, oh, I think, we need 5 pages of requirements. I don't think that at all. But I do have a subcommittee, which is Linda and Mac. And my understanding is, what is that, Dan? 25 days to, if it goes into policy or bylaws. 25 days to review the documentation and the content, and then it has to be voted on in the next meeting. So that's my item today, just letting you know that I have not forgotten about it. I do believe in that, and I think that that would be beneficial for this group.
I would look forward to seeing the results of your community. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there any items from the public?
No, I think Kurt still had something to say.
Get that hand up a little higher.
So worn out.
Pen's heavy, huh?
Go ahead.
I've got a couple things. First, an update on our Star Village project area. Phil and Yvonne Wager have begun in earnest, moving towards formation of a nonprofit group to where they could, begin to look at transitioning that land, you know, into a nonprofit group and, you know, eventually look into some sort of a, you know, most likely a community garden sort of setting. So it'll take some time, but a lot of wheels turning, and you know, it feels good to me to see that happening. It was last week I attended a meeting in the Pennington Conservation District. Many of you may recall that they asked us for a letter of support for a CIS application they were putting in. And they have received funding for that. They're hoping that West Dakota may be able to help provide some amount of match funding at some point in time, and I volunteered that Director Bierke and I, we've talked with them, we attend their meetings oftentimes, and we'll try to work with them to see if we can kind of figure out would there be ways that would fit well for us. So, you know, probably by October we'll hear more on that. Last item, yesterday evening I had a call. It's kind of sudden. You know, I haven't had a lot of time to think about how to put this out in front of the board, but you know, basically relating that the Pennington County Commission is really struggling from a planning and zoning standpoint with water issues. You know, one of the examples is the Rockerville area, and a lot of it's basically housing density relative to groundwater availability. You know, in essence, septic tanks becoming recharge tanks. Come to light that you know, the commission really wasn't even aware of the, you know, the aquifer mapping that had been done by Albus Lisenby at the School of Mines, you know, intended to help with things like that. So I said, well, I'll just, you know, I know Gary Drews pretty well. I'll give him a call and, you know, see what he says. Gary's a county commissioner, Jay, in case you're curious who the hell is Gary Drews. He says, yeah, there's really a lot of issues there, and, you know, we probably need some help. You know, we're certainly struggling. And I said, well, I'll just bring it up at the board meeting. You know, obviously there's nothing we can really do overnight, but you know, the thought that's really kind of in my head, you know, kind of twofold. So there are obviously water quantity issues here. You know, this pipeline thing. So there's a lot of growth going on. The demand for water is increasing, and, you know, obviously Box Elder is struggling, Rapid Valley struggles, the Rockerville area is struggling for enough water. In my opinion, we haven't really explored what could we do regionally. There's a great deal of groundwater. Jay, you could go hold up the Black Hills hydrology book again. There's a lot of groundwater available. Oh, if you go a mile west of here, it's not very good water. You go 2 miles, it's west, it's not very good water. You get to the hogback, that's more or less a dividing line for relatively good water versus, you know, becoming progressively deeper and poorer quickly as you move east from there. And of course, most of the growth is very close to this area. A lot of that growth is occurring east of the hogback. Other places west of the hogback, we've got Forest Service. But it might make sense to be thinking about, are there alternatives relative to water supply, you know, basically along the flanks of the hills, and might not be a bad idea to be thinking about the quality issues as well. And I don't know, I'm thinking maybe along the lines of how do we perhaps initiate a discussion on this. And, you know, I'm kind of toying with the idea, maybe if we can kick it around a little bit in advance of our October meeting, maybe we could come up with something solid enough to where we could say we could host some sort of a day-long discussion on topics like this. Probably require a special meeting on our part, something like that, then this could be a West Dakota meeting we could be involved in. I guess I'm just throwing the idea on the table and give people time to think, and you know, maybe we can talk internally, you know, is this something that, you know, might make sense to do, and, I told Gary I'd just throw the idea out there and then talk more with him. I mean, it sounds like, you know, the commission really is struggling with some of these issues. So, I'll close with that.
Okay. Any other items from directors? Anybody from the public? Oh, sorry, I didn't leave you. You didn't do that. I'm just anxious to know.
I talked to Cheryl Chapman just to see how things were going, and she said things are going well with their plan to have the work completed for the needs assessment and the incorporation in September, and then present at the October meeting. So she said a lot of the people that are involved with the incorporation are going back to their governing bodies and working that way, and then they expect they'll have a better idea of who will be involved with the incorporation. A question for our subcommittee, do we want to have a meeting this month? You know, normally it would be on a Monday towards the end of the month, a meeting with Banner.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, I guess you can let me know, but
I think we're a month or so left before their contract finish up.
okay. So anyway, I just wanted to mention we usually do, and I haven't heard anything, but
We're probably trying to wrap it up.
she said she's okay either way.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. And then Thursday, we've got the meet and greet with Jennifer Seitzman, Black Hills Council. So you're going to be there at the garage
What date was that?
this Thursday.
Yes.
Okay.
What time
10
was that?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yeah, I'm gonna be there.
Okay. So I can't remember if Director Coates, I think you were maybe going to be there. Okay.
And I was kind of iffy.
Okay. And then another question for you, Director Coates. Do you want me to pursue this meeting with Joe Bliss and Megan Kelhart with the BOR?
I'll get a message into Joe Hall. He's the Dakotas area.
Okay, so
That area's office director. So let's see what he says about getting together before we go some other convoluted route.
Okay, fair enough. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Now, is there any items from the public? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Wendy, seconded by Tom. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
All right.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Jake, for driving out today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for not giving me raspberries.
We played tonight, Buffalo
Yeah, I have no idea.
Hey, Linda, who made the motion to adjourn?
Did you bring beer?
No, but I will note, just for the
Wendy?
record, there is another river beer coming out a week from Saturday. El Rio, no river.
Seconded.
By Mac.
Rolled out remedy of River Fest in Sioux Falls at 12 noon on the 21st. I'll bring it.
Okay.
I got a quick question for you,
Sure.
if it's a good time.
Yep.
I just ran into this, and it's like, I don't remember where it came from. Was that just,
It's something was worked on before my time.
so it was just kind of a draft of,
Well, I don't really know the history of it. I came across it, and I think I sent it out to you guys.
okay, for our meeting?
Yeah, just,
Okay,
hey,
just
here's
to-
something that might be of it. It looked way too wordy to me.
Okay,
But
all right, I'll make myself
that's
a
where it
note
came
that
from.
when I meet with Wendy on that committee, I can just show it to her.
And she has it too, I'm pretty sure. Okay.
It's 2 years ago. This one, and he's telling me that very much about opening a brewery and things.
You'll have to
Put a
wait
position
Wendy's
for
in there.
5 years.
All done before you got a pen thing, and then you throw it in the garbage can.
Water.
It hurts.